Working at Walmart wasn't the most exciting or glamorous job, but it was stable. I had gotten used to late shifts, and they allow me quiet hours of reflection where I can do my job without too many interruptions. And it was perfect for me as a university student, as I could cover my expenses with flexibility in working hours. But one night, everything turned into a strange experience, which left in me a feeling of fear that will never go away. That Friday shift was as quiet as any other. I was busy arranging the shelves in the household goods department, and the store was almost empty. The customers were very few. There were only a few people left who were walking around the corridors in the late hours of the night. The clock was pointing to about 2 in the morning, and when the place began to fall silent, I felt something strange in the air. This excessive calm was comforting, but at the same time it was disturbing in a way that I can't explain. Around me, the only sound filling the place was the beats of fluorescent lights reflecting long shadows on the floor. I was concentrating on arranging towels on the shelves, trying to make sure that everything was perfectly in place, when suddenly I heard light whispers. At first, I thought that the sound was caused by the air coming from the air conditioning or maybe from a customer's cart. But after a while the sound was repeated, and this time it was stronger, resembling whispers coming from the depths of the store. "Hello." The voice came, and it sounded like someone was calling me from afar. I felt something strange running down my spine, as if a sudden cold had swept over me. The place was very quiet. There was no response, only intermittent whispers of lights. I tried to ignore what had happened, convincing myself that I was just imagining. I continued my work, but the feeling of anxiety did not leave me. The whispers began to get more frequent, as if something was approaching me in the shadows, and I suddenly felt that someone was watching me. My heart was beating fast, and whenever I looked around, I didn't see anyone. Everything seemed normal, but the feeling of fear increases unjustifiably. After a few moments, I decided to take a short break. I headed towards the staff lounge in an attempt to relieve the tension that was growing inside me. As I walked through the empty corridors, I felt the whispers following me, as if they were following me every step I took. My steps involuntarily accelerated from me, trying to escape from the feeling that was dominating me. In the lounge, I made myself a cup of coffee, hoping that it would calm my tense nerves. I sat there and tried to convince myself that everything was normal, that I just needed some rest. But as the minutes passed, I felt some relief and decided to return to work. But when I returned to the household goods department, I felt something strange in the air. One of the corridors was abnormally dark, and its lights were flashing in a strange way as if they were about to turn off. I hesitated for a moment, but decided to come forward despite the feeling of anxiety that began to creep into myself. The closer you get, the darkness in the corridor intensifies, and the air suddenly turns cold. There were strange shadows moving on the shelves, as if something invisible was watching me from among the shadows. And when I got to the end of the corridor, I saw what I never expected. There was a woman, standing with her back turned to me, wearing a long dark dress. I felt something strange deep in my heart. I froze in place, as if time had stopped. I took a step forward, trying to be sure of what I see. I said to myself, "Is she just a customer?" But I felt something unnatural in her presence. "Do you need any help?" I uttered with a trembling voice, but I received no response. The woman was standing motionless, as if part of the darkness itself. I took a step back, then moved towards her again. At this moment, she slowly turned around to meet my face. Her face was pale, her eyes completely empty of any expression. Her eyes embodied emptiness, as if she had come out of another time, from a place that did not belong to this world. "Who are you?" I whispered with difficulty, summoning my courage. But what happened next made me shudder. The woman's lips moved, but no sound came from her. Then, she sent her hand towards the end of the corridor, where the darkness was getting thicker and denser. I felt a kind of indescribable fear, as if everything around me had frozen in place. And at that moment, all of a sudden, the lights flashed and then went out completely. The place was plunged into complete darkness. I felt a cold hand touching my shoulder, as if something invisible was wrapping around me. My body trembled. I began to fumble in search of my mobile phone. The small phone screen lit up, and when I started moving in the dark corridor, the whispers came back again, louder this time, indistinctly overlapping, as if filling my ears. I quickly ran towards the entrance, my heart beating fast, my breath racing in my chest. And when I got to the door of the store, the lights flashed again, and the sound stopped. Everything was completely calm, as if nothing had happened. But I quickly turned around, and the woman disappeared. The corridor was completely empty, and the atmosphere returned as calm as before the accident. I informed my boss about what happened, but he ignored what I said and told me that it was just a fantasy. But I knew that what I saw was real. The store was not just an ordinary place as I thought. There was something else, something hiding in the shadows and feeding fear. Since that night, everything has become different for me. I always felt like I was being watched every time I worked the night shifts. I kept my phone lamp in my hand, always looking for well-lit places. The whispers did not return, but that woman, the shadows of the cold corridors, kept following me at every moment. I eventually quit working at Walmart, but that experience left a deep impression on me. I began to be afraid of dark places, those places that seem empty, where you can never know if something is watching you in the shadows. I was working at Walmart on the night shift for 6 months as a college student who needed extra income to make ends meet. The working hours were flexible, and the salary helped me cope with the costs of studying and living. The night shifts were usually quiet, especially in the electronics department where I work. After 10 o'clock in the evening, the store is almost empty, except for a few customers who come to buy some late items or wander aimlessly. That night, it was unusually calm. I was standing in a comfortable place behind the counter, watching the little movement of customers. It was around 11 p.m. when I noticed a man standing at the end of the video game arcade. He was tall, his hair was greasy, his tattered leather coat wrapped him uncomfortably. His posture was strange, as if it implied something unnatural, but I tried to ignore this feeling. I thought to myself, he's just a regular customer, no need to worry. But something in me was indicating that this man was not ordinary. After a short while, he approached the counter with some toys in his hand. His eyes were moving quickly, moving between me and the place, as if trying to escape from himself. Putting the toys on the table in front of me, I tried to keep my smile. "Have you found everything you need?" I asked him in a cheerful voice, trying to sound normal. "Yes," he said it in a low voice, without looking at me. As I was completing the payment, I could feel his gaze moving between me and the objects around him. He would look at me repeatedly and then quickly move away with his eyes. I felt something strange, as if I was the focus of his attention in an uncomfortable way. I finished the payment transaction, quickly gave him his bag. "Thanks," he said in a low voice as he walked away. But I remained standing, watching his departure, feeling something strange in me, a mixture of relief and fear. Not long ago, when I was busy rearranging the shelves, I felt something strange. I raised my eyes to find the same man standing at the end of the corridor, staring at me from afar. I tried to look busy with my business, but I couldn't get rid of the feeling of discomfort. He was standing there, as if watching me. I turned quickly, tried to ignore his presence. However, when I looked again, he disappeared. I tried to calm myself down. He's just a customer, no need to worry. Maybe I'm just nervous because of the late time. But the feeling of discomfort began to increase over time. As the night progressed, the store began to calm down more and more. I was cleaning the electronics department when I felt something strange behind me. I turned slowly, and the man was standing behind me, very close. His features were blurred in the dim light of the store, but I felt something strange in my heart. "Can I help you with something?" I asked him, trying to stay calm. "Yes," he said in a low voice, his eyes still fixed on me. "Do you have more of these toys in stock?" I tried to smile, but my heart was beating fast. "Let me check," I said, and I'm taking a step away from him so I can distance myself from the annoying situation. I walked into the back room quickly, and I was breathing deeply, trying to calm my heart that was beating abnormally. For several moments, I just needed to stay away from him. I wasn't supposed to be scared, but something in his eyes was arousing in me an inexplicable feeling. Minutes later, I returned to the front yard to find that he had disappeared. However, when I arrived at the counter, my surprise was even greater. He was standing again, this time near the gaming section. He was watching me from afar, as if making sure I saw him. It was clear now. He is not just an ordinary customer, but someone who follows me. I quickly took my phone and sent a text message to my boss, explaining the situation to him. The response took no more than a few seconds. "Stay where you are. I'm coming right away." Time passed quickly, and with the arrival of my boss, I pointed him out to the guy. My boss approached him and kindly asked if he needed something. The man reacted quickly and without a word, and then hurriedly left the store. We all felt a momentary relief, but I couldn't calm down after that. My boss stayed with me for the rest of my shift, and he followed me indirectly everywhere I went. The clock was approaching 2 in the morning when I noticed that the man had not returned, but I could not shake off the strong feeling that I was still in danger. When my shift was over, I decided to leave through the back door to avoid any new confrontation. But the moment I approached the exit, I heard a voice behind me. I turned around, and he was the same. He was standing in the middle of the road, blocking the way for me. My feet froze, and the annoying sound I heard froze me. "Hello?" He said it in a very calm voice, but it was loaded with something strange. "I just want to talk to you." At that moment, I was possessed by unprecedented fear. "I need to go," I said, trying to hold on. "Just one moment," he insisted, taking another step forward. I felt a panic attack coming over me. I didn't think twice. I ran at full speed towards my car. I didn't turn back until I got into the car, and the doors were tightly closed. My hands are shaking with panic as I search for my keys. Finally, I managed to start the car, and I rushed straight towards the nearest police station. They took my statement and assured me that they will conduct intensive patrols in the area. But I had changed. Fear had planted itself deep down in me. The guy would have disappeared, but I can't imagine how the situation could have developed if I hadn't run away at that moment. In the following days, everything became different. I can no longer walk the same distances at night without feeling suspicious. The workplace at Walmart became an unsafe place for me, and I decided to look for another job. The experience of that night left an indelible mark on me, and his eyes, which were watching me with unnatural interest, still pop up in my mind whenever I remember those moments. Working the night shift at Walmart was not the dream I pursued, but it was a way to cover my expenses while pursuing my university studies. The store was usually quiet during the night hours, which gave me enough opportunity to get things done and complete some of my studies. That night seemed like the rest of the nights, or so I thought at first. I started my shift at 10 in the evening. By midnight, I had plunged into my usual work routine, restocking the shelves and helping the rare customers who come in those late hours. The store was comfortably quiet. Only a few shoppers moved between the aisles. At 1 o'clock in the morning, a man standing near the entrance caught my attention. He was wearing a heavy coat, although the weather did not call for it. His eyes were moving rapidly around the place, as if they were looking for something, but without settling on anything. I felt chills running through my body, but I tried to expel those thoughts. Maybe he was waiting for someone. That's how I convinced myself. Over time, the guy did not leave the place. He was slowly moving around inside the store, picking up some items from the shelves, and then returning them without interest. His behavior was increasingly suspicious, and whenever I looked in his direction, he seemed to be watching me. I tried to ignore him and focus on my work, but his presence was pulling me in a way that I could not explain. By 2 a.m, I felt the need to take a break. I went to the staff lounge and made a cup of coffee. While I was sitting there, I could feel my breath rushing for no apparent reason. A strange feeling of being watched possessed me. When I returned to the store floor, I was surprised to find him in the same corridor where I was working before my break. He was standing there, pretending to look at the shelves, but his eyes quickly moved towards me as soon as I approached. I asked in a voice that I tried very hard to make normal, "Can I help you find something?" He remained silent for a moment, and then said in a faint, suspicious voice, "No, just browsing." I nodded and quickly left the corridor, my heart beating hard. I felt that there was something unnatural about him. I decided to keep an eye on him, and if his strange behavior continues, I will inform my boss. As 3 o'clock approached in the morning, the store seemed quieter than usual. The man disappeared for a while, and I began to feel some relief. But it did not last long. He reappeared, this time in the electronics department. He was standing near the security monitors, staring at them with strange interest. I approached him cautiously and asked, "Are you looking for something specific?" He turned to look at me, and his facial expression was devoid of any emotions. He said coldly, "No, just look." I felt uncomfortable and decided that this was enough. I went straight to the back office where my boss was working. She told him what she had noticed about the man and his suspicious behavior. He replied, "Don't worry. I'll deal with it. Go back to work, and if anything else happens, tell me right away." I felt some relief and returned to my work, but the feeling of fear did not leave me. The man was now moving near the checkout aisles, watching the customers finishing their shopping. He seemed to be studying their movements. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I heard a noise near the entrance. I immediately headed over to find the man arguing loudly with a woman who looked scared. He was accusing her of stalking him and trying to rob him. I tried to intervene, and I said to him in a calm voice, "Sir, is there a problem?" He turned to me angrily and said, "This woman is trying to rob me. She's been watching me since I came in." The woman looked stunned and said, "I just came to buy some groceries. I don't even know this guy." My boss arrived at that moment and managed to calm the situation. The man was asked to leave the store immediately. Despite his protest, he eventually came out muttering incomprehensible words. I thought it was over, but my relief did not last long. At the end of my shift, I went out to the parking lot and the place was almost empty. And as I was walking towards my car, I saw him standing there, right next to my car, half of his face covered with shadows. My heartbeat quickened, and I felt my hands trembling. I approached cautiously and said in a voice that I tried to make strong, "What do you want?" He smiled a cold smile and said, "I know you've been watching me. I don't like to be watched by anyone." I looked around for anyone who might help me, but the parking lot was completely empty. I tried to keep calm and said, "Look, I don't want any problems. Just leave me alone." He took a step closer, and I could see something metallic shining in his hand. I felt a panic coming over me. She screamed, "Stay away from me," and I rushed towards my car. I quickly opened the door, jumped inside, and closed the doors. The man began to knock on the window vigorously, shouting incomprehensible words. I started the engine and sped off. I can barely control the car because of the trembling of my hands. I went straight to the police station and filed a report of the incident. They took my statement and promised to monitor the store and the parking lot. Despite this, I could not get rid of the feeling of fear. During the weeks after the accident, I was always vigilant, constantly looking back and taking extra precautions. The guy did not appear again, but the experience left a lasting trace in me. In the end, I quit my job at Walmart. I felt that I was no longer safe there, and whenever I thought about that night, I felt that I was very close to facing a terrible end. I have always considered the Walmart store an ideal destination for my household needs. Its doors were open around the clock all days of the week. It was a relief, especially when the days are crowded with worries and times are tight. One night, after a long and hard day at work, I came home barely dragging my feet from exhaustion. And while I was sitting on my small sofa browsing through my list of household needs, I suddenly realized that I needed some necessary purchases for this week. I looked at the clock and found that it was almost 11 o'clock at night. I felt a little hesitant, as I wasn't comfortable with the idea of going out so late. But I thought, it won't take long. Just a quick trip, I'll buy what I need and come back. The Walmart store I used to frequent was located just a few kilometers from my apartment. I got in my car and drove off. The road was strangely quiet, which made me feel a little restless. Arriving at the parking lot, I noticed that it was almost empty, except for a few cars scattered here and there under flashing dim lights. I chose a position close to the entrance to avoid a long walk, then turned off the engine and took the reusable shopping bag from the back seat. As soon as I entered the store, I felt something different. It was suspiciously quiet, and there were only a few shoppers scattered in the aisles. The hum of fluorescent lights was the only audible sound, as if deepening the sense of emptiness inside the place. I started picking up what I needed: a can of fresh milk, a loaf of French bread, some snacks, and a set of toiletries. As I moved between the corridors, I felt as if something was watching me. I have carefully prepared the list of purchases to ensure that I will not have to wander too long. When I got to the self-checkout section and started scanning my purchases, I noticed something that made my heart race. There was a man standing near the entrance, dressed in a dark jacket, with a headdress hiding most of his face. He looked completely out of place, holding nothing and not moving, just standing there as if waiting. I tried to ignore the anxiety that was beginning to creep into my chest and focused on completing the payment. I walked out of the store into the cool air that wrapped my body and made me shiver. As I was heading towards my car, I felt a strange sensation pressing on my chest, as if the man's eyes were still watching me. Then I saw him. The man himself was standing next to a car not very far from mine. He seemed to be waiting for something, or maybe someone, but seeing him there made my heart beat violently. I tried to behave calmly as I walked towards my car, firmly holding my keys between my fingers. I was acting as if I didn't see him, but the feeling of danger was increasing with every step. I got in my car and quickly opened the door, threw my bags on the seat next to me, and then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned carefully, and I saw the man moving towards me. I no longer had time to think, so I jumped into the car and quickly closed the door. I tried to start the car, but my trembling hands barely managed to turn the key. When I turned the engine, I felt a slight relief, but it did not last long. The man approached my window and began knocking on it hard, saying in a muffled voice, "Hello, can you give me a ride somewhere nearby?" I shook my head firmly, trying to avoid looking at him directly, but this did not dissuade him. "Please, it's only a short distance." He repeated his words urgently, while hitting the glass even harder. I didn't have the courage to respond. I quickly turned the car back, not caring about a shopping cart that was behind me, and I almost collided with it. I drove towards the exit gate at a speed that made my heart beat madly. Driving away, I was looking in the rearview mirror. I saw the man standing in his place, watching me as I left. I couldn't stop looking in the mirror, as if expecting to see him following me, but he stayed there, a lonely figure mired in darkness. I didn't come home right away. Instead, I took a long road full of random turns to make sure I wasn't being stalked. When I finally got to my apartment, I was exhausted, but I didn't feel safe. I closed the door of my apartment tightly and sat down behind him, trying to calm my racing breath. That night was the worst ever. I couldn't sleep. I was jumping with every little sound the building made. I kept reliving what happened in my mind, imagining worse scenarios that could have happened. The next day, she went to the store management and reported the incident to the local police. They listened to my story, but their responses were not reassuring. "Be more careful in the future," one of the officers said coldly. Weeks passed, but I could not forget that night. Every time I went out at night, I was scared and carefully scanned my surroundings. Then, about a month later, I saw a shocking news report. A man matching that person's description was arrested in a Walmart parking lot, involved in a series of assaults. His way was to pretend to need help before he attacked. I felt great horror as I realized how close I was to being one of his victims. Since that day, I have become more cautious and always follow my intuition, realizing that the world can carry hidden threats even in the most ordinary places.